For many parts of North America on Monday, there will be a full solar eclipse, a once in a lifetime event. For many of us, the Boston Bruins winning the Stanley Cup has been a once in a lifetime event. And on today's podcast, I'm tracking Boston's path to Stanley Cup totality here in 2024.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Thursday, April 4th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Pocket Cast is what I use. It's also available on YouTube, so please do subscribe to both the audio and video feeds. Each new episode will be ready daily for you to enjoy. I wanted to also remind you that you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. Lifelong Bruins fan, been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years, hosting this podcast for the past 5 years. Before that, I was a full-time hockey news editor at The Score. And speaking of The Score, there will be one tonight, as the Bruins are in Carolina to take on the Hurricanes, wrapping up this 6-game road trip that has been pretty successful. And of the last couple games, the Boston Bruins have really been showing that playoff mentality, closing out a tight one against the Capitals by killing off a 4-minute power play in overtime, and then beating a very good Nashville Predators team, shutting them out, in fact, the other night, and they'll wrap things up here tonight against the Hurricanes, a game that we will preview later on in the podcast. But as I mentioned off the top, on Monday, April 8th, there will be a solar eclipse that will be seen through parts of North America. Now, I am not in the path of totality directly, which means from my house, I won't be able to see the sun be completely blocked, but I will only have to drive about a half an hour or so in order to see that. I think in my area, it'll be about a 99.5%, which, that little piece of the sun is still bright enough to make a difference. We want to get to where it will be completely blocked, and we're getting some eclipse glasses, of course. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. Now, I was born in 1980. Boston Bruins have been in the Stanley Cup final several times in my lifetime, but they've only won once. Their path to totality, 100% in the Stanley Cup playoffs, has been achieved only once in 2011. Of course, came extremely close back in 2019, Game 7 on home ice. But still, that little sliver allowed for the St. Louis Blues to come out on top. Now, the Boston Bruins right now, against a lot of odds and against a lot of what people were saying coming into the season, are in first place in the Atlantic Division. This after Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci retired, and a bunch of guys from last year's team either left via free agency or were traded. Taylor Hall, Nick Foligno in the latter group, the former group comprising of Tyler Bertuzzi, Dmitry Orlov, Garnet Hathaway, and others. They brought in some guys that were expected to just kind of fill the gap until this coming off season, where they will have more money to spend in free agency and they can really do a bigger retool. But the fact that the Bruins have 103 points, they're 4 points up on the Florida Panthers. They are 3 points back of the New York Rangers for first in the conference. They're set up for what could be a run to the Stanley Cup final, the path to totality. What may it look like? Well, let's track that path here right now. What would it take for the Bruins to get right in that sweet spot and get 100% coverage when it comes to winning the Stanley Cup? Well, currently they are second in the Eastern Conference, first in the Atlantic, which would mean they would get to take on the first wildcard team in the Eastern Conference playoff bracket. Unfortunately for the Bruins, that means they would be playing the Tampa Bay Lightning. They haven't had a ton of success against the Lightning this season. They're 1-1-2, which means 1 win, 1 loss in regulation, 2 overtime losses or shootout, which means they're really 1-3. They've gotten 4 out of a possible 8 points, but 2 of those were in losing efforts. The goal differential is pretty even, 14-14, 3.5 goals scored per game on the Lightning, 3.5 allowed. However, the Lightning have a ton of firepower. If the Bruins were, in fact, to match up against the Tampa Bay Lightning in round 1, well, that could bring up some cloudy skies and really rain on Boston's parade. Now, if somehow they were able to move into first in the East, well, it's a bit of a crapshoot as to who they would play. Right now, it's a bit of a dogfight between the Washington Capitals, who hold the second wildcard spot. They're tied with the Detroit Red Wings with 82 points, but have a game in hand. The Islanders are 1 point back. The Penguins, 3 points back. All those teams are in the mix. Now, when it comes to how the Bruins have succeeded against them, well, they're 1-1 against the Capitals, but have been outscored 5-3. Against the Penguins, they're 1-1. They've outscored them 10-7, so that could be a more favorable matchup. The Detroit Red Wings, the Bruins, let's see, they're 2-2, have a 15-14 advantage there. Again, I've been talking for days now about how there's no guarantees when you get into the playoffs, but certainly looks like Tampa could be the least favorable first round matchup. Now, if Florida were to overtake the Boston Bruins and they fall down to second in the Atlantic, odds are they would take on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto's a very good team, but the Bruins have done very well against them this season. They're 4-0 with a 15-7 goal differential. They've scored 3.75 goals on the Leafs, allowed only 1.75. So maybe that's what we want to see happen. Boston falling down to second to take on the Maple Leafs. And then, well, let's talk about what would happen after round 1 here as the podcast continues. Level up your ride with eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your ride, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home a huge win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. The eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, you can find the Locked On Sports Today stream over there, a 24/7 streaming channel where you can get all the biggest stories of the day with can't miss analysis, opinions, Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're charting Boston's path to Stanley Cup totality here on today's podcast, and we discussed already how the Tampa Bay Lightning might rain on Boston's parade if they are indeed matched up in the first round. They've actually fared a lot better against the Toronto Maple Leafs this season, going 4-0 against the Leafs, only 1-1-2 against the Lightning. Now, the Bruins are in a race with the Florida Panthers atop the Atlantic Division, and they've actually played pretty well against Florida with one game remaining between these two teams on the schedule. And the Bruins so far, they've gone a perfect 3-0 against the Panthers, outscoring them 10-6. They have done well to, in the regular season at least, erase the sting of losing to Florida in the first round of the playoffs last year. And that, of course, is the ultimate cautionary tale. You never know what's going to happen once the playoffs begin. Boston had a 40-something point lead on those Panthers in the regular season standings last year, and then we all know what happened in the postseason. So there's no guarantees, but we're trying to get on that perfect path, and the Bruins are a perfect 7-0 against both Toronto and Florida combined here this season. That would be seemingly the path to get out of the Atlantic Division, trying to avoid the Tampa Bay Lightning, and if not one of those teams, then playing one of these wildcard teams who just don't seem to be very good at all and kind of backing into the playoffs. Once they get out of the Atlantic, the two teams that looked most formidable in the Metropolitan Division are the New York Rangers and the Carolina Hurricanes. The Bruins have only played the Hurricanes once this season. They play them twice within the next week. So we'll get a better picture of how they stack up against the team that loaded up at the trade deadline, acquiring Jake Gensel, Evgeny Kuznetsov. They've got Frederik Andersen and Peter Kochetkov both rolling in net. The Bruins, the only team they haven't picked up a point against this season is the Carolina Hurricanes. They lost the first game 3-2. And again, we'll see how they stack up here. We'll preview that one later on. A 0-point percentage against Carolina this season. The next lowest point percentage they have against a particular opponent this year, the New York Rangers. They're 0-2-1. They have been outscored 14-7 by the Rangers this season. So while there could be a path to get out of the Atlantic, if they play Toronto, Florida, they've gone perfect 7-0 against this season. Against Carolina and New York combined, they are 0-3-1 with 2 games remaining against the Hurricanes, one tonight and another, I believe, next week on home ice. That's right. On Tuesday, they will play the Hurricanes. And they have a game against Florida on Saturday. We'll talk about that one more tomorrow. So even if the Bruins get out of the Atlantic, and provided one of New York or Carolina comes out of the Metro, which seems pretty likely, I don't see Philly or Washington or Pittsburgh or the Islanders bumping out those teams. I can't picture both of those teams going out in one or the second round. That could be a tougher go for the Boston Bruins for sure. But let's say they get through that. Then who will be coming out of the West? How have the Bruins done against Western Conference contenders this season? Well, the Dallas Stars look pretty good. The Bruins are 2-0 against them, outscoring them 7-5. They just shut out the Predators. They're 2-0 against those guys this season. Let's see. On the other side of things, they're 1-1 against the Winnipeg Jets. Against the Vegas Golden Knights, they're 1-0-1. Against the Canucks, they're 1-0-1. Against the Oilers, they're 1-0-1, which is pretty good. Against the Avalanche, they're 1-0-1. So they have picked up at least 50% of the points against these top Western Conference teams. The teams that they've had trouble with in the West are the Flames. They're 0-1-1 against them. The Wild, they're 0-1-1. The Kraken, they're 0-1-1. These are teams that will not be in the playoff picture. So the Bruins have actually performed fairly well against top Western Conference teams. Obviously, it's a smaller sample size. They only played those teams twice. But it's certainly possible once you get to that level that really anything can happen in the Stanley Cup final. Just think about when the Bruins realized their path to totality in 2011. The Vancouver Canucks were the President's Trophy winners. They were highly favored in that series, and the Boston Bruins defied the odds thanks to some sometimes miraculous play from Tim Thomas, and they came out on top in that series. So, what's my point here? Well, for the Bruins to be on that path to totality, so many things have to line up exactly perfectly. And what's more likely? A full solar eclipse or the Bruins winning the Stanley Cup? Well, at this point, come Monday anyways, they will have happened once in my lifetime. And, Boston winning the Cup, probably more likely because we won't see this again, or I won't see this again for in my area in my lifetime. It's not going to happen. Hopefully the Bruins will win a cup again in my lifetime, and would love to see it happen here in 2024. But so many things have to line up, and overall, in what was supposed to be a transition year, I think the Bruins, you could call this season a success. The regular season, for sure. A lot of people didn't even think they'd be in playoff contention or would take huge steps back after Bergeron, Krejci retired, and of course, after all those player losses over the offseason. Tonight, though, the Bruins will be in action against the Carolina Hurricanes, and that is a game we'll preview here as the podcast continues. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees do apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 is validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. The 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of your first 3% match. You must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years, and the 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC is a registered broker-dealer. It is a Boston Bruins game day. They will be in action tonight against the Carolina Hurricanes down in Raleigh. The Bruins and Canes, like I mentioned, have played only once so far this season. They'll play twice here over the remaining couple weeks of the season, well, twice within the next week. And it was Jordan Martinook who scored late in this one. The Bruins had a third period lead. They were up 2-1 in this one. Oh, actually, no, sorry. They were down 2-0. They came back. Brad Marchand scored 2 goals to tie things up. And then Jordan Martinook scored with about 2.5 minutes to go to take this one. The Bruins were outshot 33-28. That was back on January 24th. The Hurricanes have a pretty good tandem in net to go along with what the Bruins have to offer. Peter Kochetkov with a .911 save percentage. Frederik Andersen has played in 13 games this season. He missed a bunch of time with blood clot issues. He's 11-1 with a .930 save percentage. If he was even close to healthy all season long, he'd be right there in Vezina Trophy contention. The Hurricanes have a 11th ranked, an 8th ranked offense, 3.37 goals per game. 3rd ranked defense, 2.59 goals per game. Their penalty kill is 1st in the NHL, and their power play is 3rd. And if you listened to the podcast a couple days ago, you would have heard how I went through kind of the underlying numbers and talked about how the Hurricanes are a top 5 team when it comes to shot attempt differential, shot differential, scoring chances, high danger chances. This is a very, very good team, and they've only gotten better since adding Jake Gensel, who has 8 assists over the past 5 games. 1 point behind Sebastian Aho, who's got 9 points over the past 5 games to lead them in scoring recently. Aho with 85 points to lead them. Gensel, between Carolina and Pittsburgh, has 68 points in 61 games. And since coming over to Carolina, he's got 14 points in 11 games, only 2 goals, which suggests he could be due for a breakout. 5.7 shooting percentage with Carolina compared to 11.9 with Pittsburgh. So that he could be due for some positive regression as early as tonight. The Hurricanes are 8-1-1 over their past 10, coming off wins over Detroit and Montreal. And Washington is who Boston beat most recently, along with that Nashville game. They're 6-4 over their past 10 games. Carolina is also a very good face-off team. That could be a problem for the Bruins, who rank 21st, below 50% in the face-off dots. So this could be a tough one for the Boston Bruins, a tough test for a team that is looking to continue to finish strong here. 3 really tough games coming up here in a row. They play Carolina tonight, then they go home to host Florida on Saturday, and then they host Carolina again on Tuesday. So 3 pretty big games. It's a stretch in which the Bruins could very well drop in the standings a little bit. Let's see who the Panthers have on the go. Are they playing tonight? The Panthers are in action against the Ottawa Senators. So that's a winnable game for them. And then they play, of course, on Saturday, with the Panthers' next game after that coming again against Ottawa. So Boston, the next 3, Carolina, Florida, Carolina. Florida's next 3 is Ottawa, Boston, Ottawa. Advantage there for the Panthers, but that might not be a bad thing. Going back to the path of totality, Boston has matched up better this season with Toronto than with Tampa Bay. Anyways, we'll be back tomorrow to discuss whatever happens in tonight's game against the Hurricanes and bring you all the latest on the black and gold, because this is the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast, your favorite team every single day. Please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. And we'll catch you again here tomorrow on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.